Okay, do you hear me? Yeah? Okay. So first of all, I would like to thank Rodrigo and the organizing committee for this invitation. I really enjoyed to visit Talca. And today I'm going to present unpublished data about what we observed in long COVID research regarding the rapid funding we got in 2020 to study COVID in Chilean patients, and how the inflammation or the immune response is important to understand how this long COVID is produced. Okay? So briefly, we're going to start, we're going to go back to the past. We start to see cases, severe cases of COVID in which the immune response was unbalanced. So we have an increment in the innate immune response, basically neutrophils and monocyte macrophages, and we have a reduction in the adaptive immune response, mainly T cells, okay? So in 2019, my co-research, Gonzalo Labarca, who is an MD, we published a case report in which we observed in a patient with rheumatoid arthritis, when she was treated with abatacept, that is a biological therapy, that the adaptive immune response, basically T cells, was reduced in that patient, yeah? So then she got an infection and she developed severe acute respiratory distress syndrome. And what happened, because she didn't have the adaptive immune response properly working there, we have an increment in the cells from the innate immune response, yeah? So an imbalance. Response starts to produce more damage than protection. So what we observed in the COVID-19 patients, especially the severe cases, we start to see respiratory distress syndrome in the severe cases. That was, at the same time, they have lymphopenia, they have higher numbers of neutrophils, monocytes. So we thought that the innate response is going to produce, in the end, more damage. This is going to be a collateral damage of the protective immune response. So that is what is like the basic of our study. So then Gonzalo very quickly got the consent form from Servicio Salud Bio Bio. He was working at that time in Hospital Victor Rio Ruiz de Los Angeles. He was receiving the patients at that time, the severe patients, the cases. He started to collect samples. We received the samples in the lab. And we got funding from the government. It was 90 million pesos, sorry. And then in June, we set up all the strategy to study these patients. And then we start the project in July. So we collect the samples, the first samples of the patients after the disease. We start in August. So you have to remember then that the patients got severe COVID during March, April, and May, which means that this is the first variant of COVID, and which means that these patients were not vaccinated. Okay, this is the cohort that we studied. So then we took samples 4 months after the infection. So basically the aim of the project, that is COVID-1005, and all the results are published because are in the database that the government make us to put all the results, if you want to see it, was to identify the main inflammatory pathways associated with long-term pulmonary sequelae, which means secuela in Spanish, in the cases of long COVID. Who's suffering with this thing? Okay. So this is the flow chart of the patients. So we have 60 patients, basically, because of the budget and because of the time. Because these projects they had to be finished in 1 year. That was the initial time that they gave us, but then, let's say at 6 months, they extend that for another year. So we have 25 severe patients. Most of them develop respiratory distress syndrome. We have moderate patients with moderate disease, in which was a complicated characterization between these two, because some of the moderate patients require the mechanical invasive mechanical ventilation, which severes, all of them had them, but moderate may be then required as well. But remember as well that during that time, the ventilation was not in excess for all of the patients. So it was a tricky characterization, and then in the end we characterized if they developed or not Distress syndrome. We have patients with mild symptoms. We didn't get any patient without any symptom, even in 1 day or half day with fever, but all of them got a symptom. And we have a healthy control group to control basically the experiments. There were groups, of course, we were in the lab, checking us every week with PCR to be sure that we never got COVID during 4 months, and checking antibodies within the serum, yeah? So at the beginning we proposed to check this at 2 and 10 months, but Gonzalo he had a lot of friends in Spain, and you remember the wave in Spain and in Italy was very lethal for them, and they were giving a lot of information to Gonzalo, and they said, delay your recruitment to 4 months, and then we were able to delay as well to 12 months when the government gave us more time to get the results. So basically what we did with these patients, we took serum to analyze antibodies, IgM, IgG, to check cytokines and chemokines, so this is more related with inflammation. And we did proteomics with some specific samples from the patient, serum proteomics. From blood tests, we characterize all of the tests associated with the clinical chemistry laboratory, hemogram, lipids, and like normal exams, ABO group, metabolic-related exams, and we did some specific immunological tests for neutrophils, monocytes, and B cells. I ignored the T cells basically because, as I told you before, during the severe period, they have lymphopenia. So the lymphocyte is not going to cause, maybe the lack of lymphocyte, but not lymphocyte, and for the money as well. To work with immunology is quite expensive, so that's why, though it was a pain of my heart because I love T cells, I have to exclude them. And then for lung function, this project was formed by several professionals. So we have Gonzalo, who was a medic, and we have a kinesiologist as well from Universidad Santo Tomás, Mario Enriquez. So in this case, we have a tomography CT scan at 4 months. So all of the patients, we did a CT scan to check if they develop a structural damage, yeah? Then we perform as well functional analysis, because I don't know if you know, but the mechanical ventilation per se could induce a structural damage in the CT scan. So for us, CT scan alone was not enough. That's why we include the LCO and spirometry. This is to measure the diffusion of the gases in the alveoli, and spirometry is as well a functional damage to see the volume of air in the lung. Then we did functional tests called 6-minute walk test. So the patients walk during 6 minutes, and you count the meters that they walk to see the aerobic capacity of the patients, and a hand grip, that is what you use in the gym, to see your muscular strength, yeah? And we also perform sleep health, because Gonzalo, his research is mainly related with sleep health, and he published already that the data related with the sleep. So we keep the patient 1 week with an actigraphy to see the circadian cycle, and 1 night they spend the night with a polygraphy to check sleep apnea. And apart from that, they did a lot of questionnaires and surveys to the patients. So, this is finished already, of course. So we start with 60 patients. You know, sorry. Okay, so we start with the 60 patients, and during the acute phase, we checked a lot of variables because we wanted to know which were the variables during the acute phase that were important to then realize that they were going to develop sequelae at 4 months after COVID, yeah? So we have age, gender, severity, if they develop respiratory symptom distress, mechanical ventilation, if they smoke, if they drink drugs, etc. And then at 4 months, we did this pulmonary test, especially the CT scan and the LCO. We test spirometry, but in the end, we just follow the result from these 2 tests, all the chemical test and the functional test. And we repeat that at 12 months, but only in 55 of the 6 patients because 2 were pregnant and then they were in the exclusion criteria and 3 patients didn't want to participate. So this is the most important part of my talk. Yeah? This is the key of all the results that I'm going to show you after this. The classification that we decide to set what is long COVID for us, because long COVID is not defined. It's difficult to define, it's very variable, there's a lot of papers about it, but for us, we took the CT scan and demography severity score above 1, we consider that that was altered or abnormal. Yeah, it's not strict. There is something that is not correct, and that is going to be classified as a sequelae in this aspect. And we performed this other test that was very important for us, is the DLCO's diffusion of the gas, yeah, the oxygen. This is just a classification in the laboratory. If that is below 80%, it means that it is abnormal. So in that case, we have 4 groups. The first group, 18 patients, the CT scan was normal, the DLCO test was normal. Yes, structural sequelae in the lung, structural. We have 5 patients, and I'm going to say to you, ignore because we don't know how to explain this. They have the DLCO abnormal, but the CT scan was normal, and Gonzalo thinks that maybe they have issues before COVID. Yeah, and there are very few patients, so we can't do much with them. And this is the cases that were more like, for us, important, the guys that present the CT scan abnormal and the DLCO abnormal. So they were the patients in the worst scenario 4 months after COVID in terms of lung function. And we call them long-term pulmonary dysfunction patients. So I am a very optimistic person, and you have to be if you want to be a scientist. So we check what happened with this DLCO at 12 months. Yeah, because what I thought originally is that the patients are going to be with this dysfunction in the 4 months, but then all of them are going to be perfectly fine at 12 months. But it's not the case. It is improving over time, but only 2 of them are above the 80%. 2 of them are just about, and the rest are still below 80%. So this is a long-term sequelae. They cannot recover immediately. Yeah, so they have all the time this problem in the diffusion of the gases in the lung. We didn't check the CT scan because CT scan alone, you're going to see with the results, it's not going to. I'm not going to spoil the information. And we didn't have money as well to repeat the CT scan. It was very expensive. So here I'm going to start to summarize what we observed because we have a lot of data, and I'm going to show you which are the variables that are going to be important in the acute phase to then have sequelae at 4 months post-COVID. So we have age was one variable, not sex or gender, age, which was different in case of severity. For severity, gender is important. Here, age is more related. COVID severity is important, but it's important for this group and for both groups with partial sequelae. So if you have severe COVID, of course, you are more prone to have sequelae, but it's not a defining factor. Not just because you're severe, you're going to have sequelae. That is very important to understand. And comorbidities was one of the most important things as well, specifically these 2, arterial hypertension and insulin resistance. So here is what I'll mention regarding severity. So I don't like this one, I prefer with the ones that develop respiratory distress syndrome. So you can see here most of them, and a few of the ones that didn't develop go to the CT group, but in this case it's the same. So these patients, the one that developed the CT scan altered, the one that developed the CT scan and the DLCO altered, they start very similar. They're very similar in the acute phase. So we wanted to understand if they were different regarding the function of all of the tests that we performed, and if there was any explanation to understand why some of them get better and the other ones not. So to do this, and because we have a lot of data, we use artificial intelligence with human intelligence, of course, from Mabel Vidal. She's made in Utalca. She's a bioinformatician from here. She's very clever, amazing scientist. She did a PhD in computer science at the Universidad Concepción. She won the L'Oreal Prize. She's brilliant. And I said to Mabel, I want you to take all of the data from acute phase and 4 months, all of the 100 of Excel files we had, and tell the algorithm that we want to know which are the variables important to differentiate these 4 groups. Because we wanted to know if there was a difference specifically between this group and this one. Yeah? So she did her magic, and she gave us these charts. So we start to check the parameters that were more important to differentiate this group, and we start to see variables related with the walking test, with the spirometry, questionnaire regarding the activity of the patients, and inflammatory parameters like cytokines, platelets, antibodies, and so on. So, because, of course, I love artificial intelligence, but I prefer human intelligence as well, so we have to confirm if this is true, if what the data is showing us is correct. So we divide these patients and we start to see the different parameters. These parameters is very important. It's called force vital capacity. So it's the area that you excel in the spirometry. Have you done spirometry? You excel. So that's the volume. It's reduced in these patients. And the force respiratory volume, that is the one that you excel in the first second, is reduced as well. So when you do a relationship between these 2 variables, if this is below 70, they said that you have an obstructive problem in the lung, which means that the air is not going to pass, like when you have asthma or EPOC. But in this case, they have a restrictive problem, so more related with fibrosis. So you have less oxygen. Yeah? It's not me, it's the data. For all the questionnaires that they perform, and I have personal problems with questionnaires because I don't know if you saw Dr. House. It was a good series for us in class, and Dr. House always said the patient died. The patient never said the truth, and it was correct. And these patients have cognitive damage after COVID, so it's very difficult when you talk to them. Say, oh, how do you feel? Okay, well, it's got no, I never. It was 3 weeks in mechanical ventilation. So they have a lot of cognitive damage. It's true. It's complete, I'm not joking. It's true. So the physical SF2 form show that they have a low score, which means that they recognize that they have a problem, like they were like almost low or without energy or activity. So we perform the 6-minute walk test. We can see the data, and they walk less meters. They have less saturation of oxygen before and after, and the fatigue scale as well is increased when they finish the test. So they feel more tired, not because they said that they feel more tired, because we analyzed that, and it's the case that they have less aerobic capacity and they have less strength compared to the other groups. That's why it was so important for me to see difference between this group and this group, to validate the separation that we did at the beginning. That it was not because we wanted to do it. We have a bachelor student that was 1 year analyzing all the possibilities to finally propose that. And then, and here's where the story becomes more complicated, because we checked them again at 12 months, and we talk a lot about the problems that they have during the recruitment. And they said, we are going back to work, we start to feel like active again. However, we're increasing weight. I said, so why they can say we're fine and we finish the project? So then we test all the metabolic parameters, yeah? Because we saw, although I have to be honest, we saw that the insulin was altered at 4 months. There was something related with the metabolism that, of course, I know because we have a lot of information already. But then when we check glycemia, insulin, HOMA, and glycated hemoglobin, we can see that the patients, when we compare because you can't see it properly, but when you compare 4 with 12 months, you can see that the parameters regarding the insulin resistance or the glucose metabolism, it's alter over time in these patients. So that's not good for them, okay? Total cholesterol was okay, HDL okay, triglycerides was increased, but it's related with the glucose metabolism, and BMI was increased between 4 and 12 months, so they were gaining weight, despite that they were going back to work. So what we thought in this case, well, and of course, if you like metabolism, we go to metabolic syndrome, we have circumference weight, blood pressure, triglycerides, HDL, blood glucose, and we mark in the case that we were improving or worsening the variance, and this group was increasing the metabolic syndrome parameters over time. Yeah? So what we think, what is happening here, what is happening in the cell, because we're biochemists. So when you have less oxygen, we think that the phosphorylation in the mitochondria is not going to work properly, and you need energy. So what is the other option that you have? It's going to be glycolysis. Yeah, it's not efficient, but you have to do it. And it seems that the body is working as a cell, so trying to promote the glycolytic pathway because you don't have enough oxygen to get all the energy from the mitochondria. Although that is hypothesis, is what could explain, but of course there's other papers that say that viral directly cause damage in the pancreas. There's a lot of information, but this is the data that we have. So as a summary in the clinical part, we can say that advanced age, COVID severity, hypertension, insulin resistance are important in the acute phase. So in this aspect, the patient with long-term pulmonary dysfunction, they're going to have a restrictive lung damage, reduced aerobic capacity, and muscular damage, and more metabolic syndrome at long term, at 12 months. So it's very bad luck, bad information. So it's very important to control this patient, to treat them, because we have one case of a person that improved their parameters, and we call them, so what did you do? I said, no, I'm doing more energy, I'm doing more exercise, I went to the nutritionist, so you can't revert this. So it's important information as well. We applied for Funded, but we didn't get it, but that's life. And now we're going to go to the second part, because first we did the clinical part. So I hope I convinced you that we have 4 groups, and we have one group that we are 100% sure that they have sequelae, that we can call them long COVID with 100% certainty. And now we want to know why, yeah? Why some of them develop sequelae, and, or maybe you don't want to know, but for me it was interesting. And of course I'm an immunologist, so the inflammatory response is my passion. So we start and we check a lot of cytokines and chemokines. I'm putting just the ones that were significant. And this was brilliant because it was CXCL10, CXCL9 that are related with cardiovascular diseases, heart infarct. Because we have a project, I'm going to show you the data. So, and it's related as well with hypertension that we saw in the acute phase. So this chemokine is increased, so compared to the other groups, and I love when I see the difference with this group. IL-6 is increased as well, but it's not different between these two groups. So it's important as well, especially in severity, but not easy for me to understand. IL-6 is very complicated cytokine. Platelet activation, and here I have to say thank you to Marcelo, because I called him and said, Marcelo, I need a protocol to check platelets. And you're going to ask, why platelets? There are so many other cells. Because the only cell in the hemogram that was different, significantly different, was platelets. The amount of platelets this patient had was increased. So I said, okay, let's do something with platelets. So we took platelets from a healthy person in the lab, and we did this experiment with all of the serum at the same time, so it's an experiment that it is what it is. No, you can't do something about it, it is what it is. Basically, you put the platelets from that person in all of the tubes, you put serum from all of the patients, and then you check expression of CD62. In CD61 positive, you check it out by flow cytometry. Unfortunately, you can see that all of the patients that they had COVID, well, not these ones, not that much, but most of them have a higher induction of platelet activation just because they had COVID. Because look at the control. Control is around 33%, which means that thrombosis and COVID are good friends, unfortunately. And the humoral response, I'm not going to talk much about this, but the antibodies are increased regarding severity and sequelae, and C5a, that is a complement protein. So now we go to the more deep inside data. And we took 8 patients from the CT only altered group, and 8 patients from the CT scan abnormal and DNCO abnormal. So these two that, you remember, they were very severe at the beginning, but then in the end, they're gonna have or not sequelae, right? And we were very lucky that we have these samples during the acute phase as well. So we have the proteomics in the serum from these patients during the acute phase and 4 months after, and the controls that we were asked in the lab. So you can see with these, in the plot PCA, that they separated very well. So this work was done in Instituto Melissa. Yeah. With the different patients, you can see just with the heat map, the difference between the groups, just to show you that the proteomics was correct. And then we put the data in left ventricular dysfunction, so heart dysfunction. Yeah? So pathway related with heart dysfunction were associated with sequelae. I know you don't believe me, but we have another cohort in the lab in which we have patients that have heart attacks, and the cardiologist gave us blood from the coronary artery and from peripheral artery, and we compare, and we can see that monocytes are more or are increasing percentage in the coronary compared with the periphery, and similar we observe with these chemokines. So we knew this data we did before the COVID project. So we knew that these chemokines are key regarding cardiovascular dysfunction, and they call monocytes. Sorry. So they induce the expression of the receptor of these chemokines, and they increase migration. So what is happening is when the heart has a dysfunction, they produce these chemokines. So the monocytes increase the expression of the receptor, and we believe that they go to the heart, and in this case, in terms of cardiovascular disease, we were studying all the protein that is called LOX1, LDL, oxidative receptor. They go there, they eat the LDL oxidated, they transform into fun cells. But in this case, this was associated with a pathway that was in the acute phase. So if the patient during the acute phase has something related with coronary dysfunction, it's going to be more prone to develop sequelae. So we did the tax function, and we can see again, cardiovascular dysfunction, and here we have glomerular injury as well, so problems in the kidney as well. And then when we check the upstream, because of course we want the answer, what is causing this, we can see here, of course you can see it because it's very small, this is interferon gamma, and here you have LPS, yeah? So we have regulator associated with the microbiota or bacteria, I don't know, and interferon gamma signaling, which is a very important response in antiviral and anti-bacterial Th1 associated with pharmacoimmunology, but it was not here. Here you have IL-6 as main top regulators. So we again went to check all of the pathways associated with, in this case, monocytes, because that was the cell that the data was telling us that was important. And what we got from the IPA is that check, the computer said to us, check the Fc gamma receptor phagocytosis pathway. And when we check that, you can see that these patients in orange, everything is activated. Whereas in the patients with long COVID or pulmonary dysfunction, everything is inhibited. So this pathway is inhibited, which is very important pathway for the clearance of the virus, because this is the Fc gamma receptor. Recognize the Fc portion of the antibody, which recognize the viral, and promote phagocytosis. Yeah? Okay. So I wanted to know why, and we measured the expression of CD16, that is one of the Fc receptor 3A. And what we got from the data is that that expression in this patient is reduced in comparison with the other groups. So they have less monocytes that can clear the virus, basically. And what is related with that expression? Interferon gamma, yeah. So interferon gamma is very important during the acute phase to promote a response, like a direct innate response to promote the clearance of the virus. And that's it. So I have to say that this project was funded by the COVID-105 project. We have a lot of people working. We work like the Avengers. Each of us had like a superpower. So one is kinesiology, the other one is medic, the other one is nurse, take the sample, proteomics. So we all have to talk like similar language, but we work like as a collaborative group. We start to collaborate as well with other COVID projects from the country, and that starts as a consortium, Contact 19, which is directed by Ricardo Verdugo, who is now in Universidad as well. And that turns into an anillo, Genonet, because he likes to analyze genetic variants, basically. So they're trying to see if there is something related with genetic variants and long COVID. And that's my home, that's my email. If you want data, if you need data, if you're interested in this, and whatever you need, you can send me an email, or you can ask for my WhatsApp to Rodrigo. And finally, and this is the spoiler that I'm going to give you, because what I show you is what's happening in the acute phase. What is the pathway that is coming now at 4 months in these patients is progression of tumor. So what is happening is, because the immune response is not correct, the system is identifying, in this case, a specific microRNA. I don't work with microRNAs, but if you are interested in microRNAs, you can share the data as well, and these other proteins that I don't know. But progression of tumor, addition of blood cells, binding of leukocyte, homing of leukocyte. So this patient, what is going to be important to check? Cardiovascular disease, metabolic disease, tumor, and ideally to have like a proposed, like, I don't know, a program for them to check the metabolic parameters, or to perform exercise, or to do nutritional. So we need like a lot of professionals working together for this a specific group of patients. Thank you very much.
well known at the time of the pandemic, I was very aware of that some organizations develop a problem like that, mostly academics, mostly. So that might be related to what you observe. Unfortunately, yeah, this is kind of small. It's a pity that this kind of very interesting programs in Chile are very short-term, and that's it. Your approach was very valuable. So I got what you said. The thing is that during COVID, people that suffered COVID, some of them develop heart problems that maybe what
we have a very sad case in our department. We have a colleague that had a problem in the heart, and he was waiting for surgery, and he got COVID, and 2 weeks after that he died. So there is some relationship for sure. Yeah, you need to prove that. So basically, to prove that, you need to do experiments and to do tests, and that is really not cheap.
Okay, very, very interesting presentation, congrats. How do you explain that the mechanism behind this, if in the long COVID, the virus is not supposed to be around? So maybe it's an epigenetic changes in the immune system or something like that, because the inflammation is the center of this phenotype.
Correct.
What do you think?
Okay, so in the study, normally when we have a severe patient, it was with the nail, it was with the white. So virus was the same. Yeah, we were covering this was a very family study because we were like, but normally the whites were always like less severe. So, and we don't have the variants here, so we can't put the virus in this scenario. Could be genetic, but we check because we are in the clinic review if genetic variants could explain this, and we were not so sure. And what we think, what I'm going to put my money on it, is the state of the patient at the time that they go COVID. If you are in a well state in health service, like in nutrition, weight, comorbidities, you're going to be able to deal with it. Whereas if you're not in a good shape, you have like a basal inflammation already increased, and the control checkpoints maybe are not working properly. So you're going to start with a response that maybe you're not going to be able to stop, because the problem is not going to stop. Although I didn't study the adaptive immunity, but you can't stop the innate response. So you start to see more damage. So for me, it's more like the patient has a health state. And because in some cases they were able to get better at 12 months in comparison to 4 months, especially the ones that started to exercise. Because when they finished after the COVID, they were 3 weeks, 4 weeks in the hospital. And at the end of that period, they're very skinny. They lose a lot of weight, a lot of muscle, and then they have like a rebound because they say, oh, I'm very skinny. They start to eat it. So that's more psychological when it happens. We talk with all of them. So the metabolic reprogramming is as well like this, and then up, and then they go on, and as well, remember the stress in that period because we were like the crisis, the national crisis, and the pandemic. So we were like in a very stressful situation. So I think it's very related to this condition.
Okay, thank you.
Aurelia, tenía a Paola
Thank
y
you.
terminamos con nadie. Vamos a hablar con
got better with the immune system. It's a good question. It's not a check out because still it's very few. It's not going to be statistically significant. Not those 2 cases in comparison with the other ones, and
2017. So I applied for another grant as